The cargo hold smelled like fear and blood. Daniel Reed wrinkled his nose as he stepped through the heavy door, his boots clanging on the metal floor. 3 weeks into his first deep space job, and he still wasn't used to the sounds a ship made. Every creak and groan set his nerves on edge. Stay away from Container 7. First Officer Hallex had warned him that morning. The insectoid's mandibles clicked nervously when he spoke. The beast inside will tear you apart if it gets the chance. Daniel had nodded and promised to be careful. But now, standing in the dim cargo hold with his maintenance checklist, he couldn't help his curiosity. Container 7 sat in the far corner, reinforced steel with bars thick as his arm. Warning lights blinked red around its frame. Something massive moved inside. He should have walked away, should have checked the other containers and finished his shift. Instead, Daniel found his feet carrying him closer. The snarl hit him first. Low and rumbling, it vibrated through his chest. Then he saw it. The creature was enormous. Bigger than any dog Daniel had ever seen, nearly the size of a small horse. Its body was covered in midnight blue scales that caught the dim light, with ridge-like fur running down its spine. 6 powerful legs ended in claws that looked sharp enough to cut through steel. When it turned its head toward him, Daniel saw eyes like molten amber burning with pure rage. A Varkesh stalker. He'd read about them in the ship's database. Apex predators from a high-gravity world. Known across 3 sectors for their viciousness, this one had been loaded onto the distant horizon at the last station, bound for some research facility deeper in space. The stalker lunged at the bars. Metal screeched. Daniel's heart hammered, but he didn't step back. Something in those amber eyes held him frozen. Not the violence, but something underneath it. Something that reminded him of a cornered animal rather than a mindless killer. Beautiful, isn't it? Engineer Bors rumbled from behind him. The granite looked like walking stone, his craggy face expressionless, in the way that death is beautiful. How long has it been like this? Daniel asked. Since we loaded it. 11 days now. Won't eat, won't drink. Just snarls and attacks anything that comes close. Captain wants to space the whole container. Save us the trouble. Daniel moved closer to the cage. The stalker's lips pulled back, revealing teeth like daggers. That snarl turned into something between a roar and a scream. But Daniel noticed other things too. The way the creature's breathing came too fast, how it favored its left side, the dried blood matting the fur along its flank. It's hurt, Daniel said. Bors made a sound like grinding rocks. Laughter, maybe. It's a terror hound human. Probably hurt itself trying to break free. They're not smart enough to know when to stop fighting. Daniel didn't argue, but he couldn't shake the feeling that Bors was wrong. Those eyes were too intelligent, too aware. This wasn't mindless rage. This was fear. The stalker circled inside its cage, never taking its eyes off Daniel. Its tail, thick and powerful, lashed against the bars. But after a moment, the snarling quieted to a low growl. Still threatening, still dangerous, but watching now. Waiting. I should report this to the captain, Daniel said quietly. That injury could get infected. The whole cargo could be worthless if it dies. Captain won't care. Thing's more trouble than it's worth. Bors turned to leave. Finish your maintenance check and stay away from that cage. I don't want to scrape what's left of you off the floor. When Bors left, Daniel stood alone in the cargo hold with the stalker. The creature had settled into a crouch, those amber eyes still fixed on him. Its breathing was labored, painful. The wound on its flank looked worse up close, infected and angry. How long had it been in pain? How long since it had been taken from wherever it came from, thrown into a cage and hauled across space to be delivered like a package? Daniel pulled out his datapad and started recording notes. The injury, the behavior, the signs of distress. Captain Wren might not care about a dangerous animal, but he would care about losing money on dead cargo. I'll try to help, Daniel said softly to the stalker. I know you don't understand me, but I'll try. The creature's ears, swept back ridges along its skull, twitched slightly. Then the snarling started again, louder than before. Daniel finished his shift and headed to the captain's quarters. Ren was a Maltuvian, 4 arms and a face that showed every one of his 60 years in space. He listened to Daniel's report with growing impatience. "The beast is a lost cause," Ren said, waving 2 hands dismissively. "I've seen its kind before. They don't survive captivity. It'll be dead before we reach the research station." "But the contract has penalties for damaged goods, yes. But the station knows what they're getting. A Varkesh stalker. Everyone knows they're nearly impossible to transport alive." Ren leaned back in his chair. "You're new to space, Reed. You'll learn. Not everything can be saved, especially not something that wants to kill you." Daniel left the captain's quarters with a hollow feeling in his chest. Back in his own small room, he pulled up everything the ship's database had on Varkesh stalkers. There wasn't much. Dangerous, aggressive, pack hunters, never successfully domesticated. High intelligence but hostile to other species. But one line caught his attention. Stalkers removed from pack structures exhibit extreme stress responses and often die in captivity. Daniel thought about those amber eyes, the fear underneath the rage. A pack animal, alone and terrified, lashing out at everything because it didn't understand what was happening to it. He'd grown up with dogs on Earth, rescues mostly. Animals that had been abused or abandoned, that snarled and bit because they'd learned that humans meant pain. His mother had taught him patience, how to read body language, how to let them come to you instead of forcing contact. This was different. This was an alien creature that could easily kill him. That probably would kill him if he gave it the chance. But those eyes, those intelligent, terrified eyes. Daniel made a decision that would change everything. Tomorrow he would go back to that cage. He would try something that everyone would call stupid, reckless, impossibly human. He would try to help the terror hound. Outside his window, stars streaked past as the distant horizon pushed deeper into space, carrying its cargo of goods and one very dangerous creature toward an uncertain future. Sleep didn't come easy that night. Daniel lay in his bunk listening to the ship's engines hum through the walls. Every time he closed his eyes, he saw those amber eyes staring back at him, full of rage and terror in equal measure. By the time his shift started, he'd made up his mind. Whatever happened, he couldn't just watch the stalker die. The cargo hold was quieter during the night cycle. Most of the crew slept while the ship's automated systems kept them moving through the vast emptiness of space. Daniel had volunteered for the late shift, knowing it would give him time alone with the creature. He brought a portable light and his datapad. No food, no tranquilizers, nothing that might seem threatening. Just himself and the knowledge he'd gathered through hours of research. The stalker was awake when he arrived. It always seemed to be awake. Those amber eyes tracked him as he walked across the cargo hold, but this time, the snarl came slower, quieter, as if the creature was too tired to maintain its fury. Daniel sat down on the floor about 3 meters from the cage, close enough to see, far enough to be safe if the stalker lunged. He set his datapad beside him and just breathed, letting the silence settle. "I read about you," he said softly. "Your people, I mean. Varkesh stalkers from Vrakon before. High-gravity world, thick forests, pack hunters. You're supposed to live in groups of 10 to 15. Hunt together. Raise young together." The stalker's ears twitched. It hadn't moved from its corner, but it was listening. "They took you from your pack, didn't they? Just grabbed you and threw you in a cage. No explanation. No understanding. Just you alone, for the first time in your life." Daniel knew he was projecting. The creature couldn't understand his words. But something in its body language changed. The rigid tension eased slightly. The growl faded to something almost like a whine. "I had a dog once," Daniel continued. "A rescue. Someone had beaten him so badly he couldn't trust anyone. First time I met him, he bit me. Drew blood. Everyone said I should give up, that he was too damaged. But my mom said something I never forgot. She said fear and anger look the same from the outside. You have to look deeper to see which one you're dealing with." He stayed there for an hour, just talking, telling stories about Earth, about the animals he'd known, about learning patience from his mother. The stalker never moved from its corner, but its eyes never left him either. And gradually the growling stopped altogether. Over the next few days, Daniel fell into a routine. Every shift he would spend time near the cage. Never pushing, never demanding, just being present. A calm, predictable presence in the stalker's chaotic world. He noticed patterns. The creature was most aggressive after the feeding drones came. Their mechanical arms shoving food through a slot in the cage. It hated the drones, snarling and snapping even though it never ate what they brought. But when Daniel was there, when the cargo hold was quiet, the stalker would sometimes approach the bars. Watching. Waiting for something Daniel couldn't quite name. On the 5th day, he saw the wound clearly for the first time. The stalker had shifted in its sleep, and the infected gash along its left flank was visible in the light. Red and swollen, the edges crusted with dried blood. It had to be agony. Daniel went straight to First Officer Hallex. "I need medical supplies," he said. "Antibiotics, pain medication, something to treat infected wounds." Hallex's mandibles clicked thoughtfully. "For the stalker? It's dying, slowly. That infection is going to kill it if we don't treat it. The creature won't let anyone close enough to treat it. I can do it remotely. Use a medical drone to inject antibiotics into its food. If it starts eating, the medication will help. If the pain eases, maybe it'll calm down enough to actually treat the wound properly." Hallex considered this. As first officer, he had the authority to approve medical supplies for cargo. "Captain Wren won't like it. He's already written off the shipment. Then he won't care if we try." Daniel met the insectoid's multifaceted eyes. "What's the worst that happens? It doesn't work and we lose cargo we've already lost." "The worst that happens," Hallex said slowly, "is that you get close enough for it to kill you." "But you're right. We've already lost this cargo. Might as well try to salvage something." He authorized the supplies. "But Daniel, be careful. Humans have a reputation for caring too much about things that want them dead." That evening, Daniel prepared the food himself, real meat from the galley's synthesizer, laced with antibiotics and pain medication. He placed it in the cage using the mechanical arm, then retreated to his usual spot on the floor. The stalker approached slowly. It sniffed the food, then looked at Daniel. For a long moment they stared at each other. Then the creature lowered its head and began to eat. Daniel felt something tight in his chest ease. It was a small victory, but it was something. The next morning, the change was visible. The stalker's breathing came easier. It moved with less pain, though the wound still looked terrible. But more importantly, when Daniel entered the cargo hold, the creature didn't snarl. It watched him with those amber eyes, and there was something different in them now. Not trust, not yet. But maybe the beginning of it. A crack in the wall of fear and rage that had surrounded the creature since it was caged. "Hey there," Daniel said softly, settling into his usual spot. "Feeling better?" The stalker's tail twitched. Not the aggressive lashing from before, but something almost curious. It approached the front of the cage, massive paws silent despite their size. Up close, Daniel could see the individual scales on its body, the way they overlapped like armor. The ridge fur along its spine was matted and dirty, but underneath he could see hints of a deeper blue, almost purple in the right light. "You're beautiful," Daniel said. "Anyone ever tell you that?" "Probably not. Probably they just saw the teeth and the claws and decided you were a monster." The stalker tilted its head. Its ears, those swept-back ridges, perked forward. Not aggressive, interested. Daniel took a risk. He pulled out his datapad and played a sound file he'd found in the ship's database. Varkesh pack calls, recordings made by researchers from a safe distance. The sounds were complex, somewhere between howls and musical notes, layered in harmonics that seemed impossible for a single creature to make. The stalker's reaction was immediate. Its body went rigid, every muscle tensing. Then it threw back its head and answered the call. The sound that came from its throat was heartbreaking, lonely, desperate. A pack call with no pack to answer. When the echoes faded, the creature lowered its head and made a sound Daniel had never heard before, soft and almost questioning. A whimper. "I'm sorry," Daniel said, his own throat tight. "I'm so sorry. I didn't mean to hurt you. I just wanted to understand." The stalker looked at him, and for the first time, Daniel saw past the predator. He saw a person. Different, alien, dangerous, yes, but a person nonetheless. Intelligent, emotional, suffering. That night, Daniel made another decision. This one even more reckless than the first. He was going to enter that cage. He was going to treat that wound properly. And if the stalker killed him for it, well, at least he would have tried. He just had to figure out how to convince Captain Wren to let him do something so completely insane. Daniel found Captain Wren in the observation deck, staring out at the stars with two of his forearms crossed behind his back. The Maltuvian turned when Daniel approached, his weathered face showing mild irritation. "Let me guess," Wren said. "You want to do something stupid with the stalker?" "I want to enter the cage," Daniel said. "No point in dancing around it. The creature is healing, but that wound needs proper treatment. I can't do it with drones." Wren's other two arms crossed over his chest. "Absolutely not. I'm not explaining to headquarters why I let crew walk into a death trap. It's not a death trap anymore. The stalker is calmer. It's eating. It responds to me. It's a predator, Reed. You've spent, a week sitting near its cage? That doesn't make you friends. That makes you patient prey. With respect, Captain, I think you're wrong." Daniel pulled out his data pad and showed the recordings he'd made. The stalker eating while he watched. The way it approached the bars without aggression. The almost curious tilt of its head when he spoke. Wren watched in silence, his expression unreadable. When the last video finished, he sighed. "You humans are going to get yourselves killed one day. You know that, right? This instinct to befriend everything with teeth." "Maybe," Daniel admitted, "but that instinct is also why we survived on Earth. We didn't just fight predators. We learned to work with them. Wolves became dogs. Wildcats became companions. We're good at making friends with things that want to eat us. This isn't a wolf, Reed. It's an alien creature with intelligence we barely understand and instincts we can't predict. Which is exactly why we should try to understand it better. Captain, this stalker is dying inside that cage. Not just physically, but mentally. You read the reports. They're pack animals. Isolation is torture for them. Every day we keep it locked up alone, we're breaking it further. And your solution is to walk in there and hope it doesn't rip you apart? My solution is to try. To show it that not everyone is an enemy. To treat its wound and give it a chance to heal." Daniel met the captain's eyes. "If it kills me, that's on me. But if I don't try and it dies in that cage, that's on all of us." Wren was quiet for a long moment. Finally, he spoke. "First Officer Hallex would need to supervise. Full safety protocols, containment fields, tranquilizer systems, the works. And at the first sign of aggression, you're out. Understood?" "Understood. And Reed, if this goes wrong, I'm noting in the log that you insisted against direct orders. I won't have this reflect on my command record." Daniel nodded, knowing it was as close to permission as he would get. 2 hours later, the cargo hold had been transformed into something resembling a medical facility. Hallex had set up emergency containment fields around the cage, ready to activate if the stalker attacked. Engineer Bors stood at the controls for the tranquilizer system, his stony face doubtful. Captain Wren watched from a monitor on the bridge, along with the rest of the senior crew. Daniel stood outside the cage door with medical supplies in a pack on his back and his heart hammering in his chest. The stalker watched him from inside, those amber eyes following his every movement. "Last chance to back out," Hallex said, his mandibles clicking nervously. "I'm going in," Daniel said. His hands were shaking. He clenched them into fists to stop the trembling. The cage door opened with a mechanical hiss. Daniel stepped inside and the door sealed behind him with a clang that seemed far too final. The stalker didn't move. It sat in the middle of the cage watching him, waiting. Daniel could see the tension in its body, the way its muscles coiled beneath the scales. One wrong move and it would strike. He knew that. Everyone watching knew that. Daniel took a slow breath and sat down on the floor. Not approaching. Not threatening. Just making himself small and vulnerable in the way that animals understood. "Hey," he said softly. "It's okay. I'm not here to hurt you." The stalker's nostrils flared, taking in his scent. Its ears twitched forward, then back. Deciding. Judging. Daniel pulled the medical supplies from his pack, moving slowly and deliberately. Antiseptic. Clean bandages. A synthetic skin sealant that would help the wound close. He laid them out between himself and the creature, showing what he'd brought. "I want to help with that wound," he said. "I know it hurts. I know you're scared. But if we don't treat it, it's going to get worse. And I think you know that too." The stalker made a low sound in its throat. Not quite a growl, but not friendly either. A warning, maybe. Or a question. Daniel pulled out a piece of fresh meat from his pack. He'd synthesized it himself. made sure it was the kind the stalker liked. He placed it on the floor and pushed it gently toward the creature. "Peace offering," he said. The stalker looked at the meat, then at Daniel, then back at the meat. It leaned forward and sniffed. Then, with surprising delicacy for something so large, it picked up the meat and ate it. Its eyes never left Daniel's face. When the meat was gone, the stalker took a step closer, then another, until it was standing directly in front of Daniel. So close he could feel the heat radiating from its body. This close he could see every detail. The way its scales caught the light, the scars on its muzzle from old fights, the intelligence burning in those amber eyes. Daniel didn't move, barely breathed. The creature lowered its massive head until its nose was inches from his face. It breathed in deeply, learning his scent. Learning him. Then, so slowly Daniel almost missed it, the stalker tilted its head to the side, exposing the ridge fur behind its ear. It was an invitation. Daniel's hand shook as he raised it. Every instinct screamed that this was insane. But he'd come this far. He'd asked for trust. Now the creature was offering it. His fingers touched the ridge fur. It was softer than he expected, warm and slightly coarse. The stalker's eyes half closed, and from deep in its chest came a sound like nothing Daniel had ever heard. A rumble, a purr, a sound of contentment. He scratched gently behind the creature's ear, and the stalker leaned into his touch. On the bridge, Captain Wren stared at the monitor in disbelief. "By all the stars in the void," he whispered. In the cargo hold, Daniel felt tears on his face. "Good," he whispered to the stalker. "You're so good. I've got you. You're safe now." The stalker's tail wagged. Just once, but unmistakably. Like a dog greeting someone it trusted. Daniel spent the next hour in the cage, treating the wound while the stalker lay calmly beside him. The creature flinched when the antiseptic stung, but it didn't pull away, didn't attack. It trusted him to do what needed to be done. When he finally sealed the wound with synthetic skin, Daniel sat back and just rested his hand on the stalker's side. Feeling it breathe, feeling the life still strong inside it. "We did it," he said softly. "You're going to be okay." The stalker turned its head and looked at him. And in those amber eyes, Daniel saw something that changed everything. Not just acceptance, not just calm, recognition, connection, the beginning of a bond. When Daniel finally left the cage, Hallex met him at the door. "I have never," the first officer said slowly, "in my entire life seen anything like that." "What are you humans?" Daniel didn't have an answer. He just knew that somewhere in the vast complexity of human evolution, his species had learned something precious. They'd learned that the scariest creatures could become the truest friends. That fear could become trust. That isolation could become connection. All it took was patience, understanding, and the willingness to reach out your hand, even when you were terrified. The stalker watched him go, its amber eyes calm for the first time since being caged, and when Daniel looked back, he could swear the creature was smiling. The change in the stalker over the next week was remarkable. The creature that had once snarled at every shadow now greeted Daniel with something that looked suspiciously like joy. Its tail would wag when he entered the cargo hold. It would press against the bars of the cage, making soft chirping sounds until he came close enough to scratch behind its ears. Daniel found himself spending more time in the cage than out of it. He'd bring his meals down to the cargo hold, eating while the stalker rested beside him. He'd talk about Earth, about home, about the family he'd left behind to work in space, and the stalker would listen, its amber eyes fixed on his face, its ears perked forward. The crew noticed, of course. Engineer Bors stopped by one evening while Daniel was in the cage, running his hands through the stalker's ridge fur, checking for any signs of new injuries or problems. "I owe you an apology," Bors said, his gravelly voice softer than usual. "I called it a mindless beast." "I was wrong." "You weren't wrong," Daniel said. "You just didn't see what it could be, what it needed to be." He looked at the stalker, who had rolled onto its back like an enormous puppy, exposing its belly for scratches. It was never mindless. It was just scared and alone. "My people have records," Bors said slowly. "From hundreds of years ago, when a more advanced species came to our world, they treated us as mindless laborers, beasts of burden. It took us centuries to prove we were more than that. More than the fear they projected onto us." Daniel understood. Every species gets judged by its surface, but underneath there's always more. Your people seem to understand that better than most. Bors paused. I've been reading about Earth, about the animals you've domesticated. It's an impressive list. We didn't really domesticate them, Daniel said, scratching the stalker's belly until its back leg kicked involuntarily. We partnered with them. They chose to work with us as much as we chose to work with them. Mutual benefit, mutual trust. The stalker made a groaning sound of contentment, its eyes closed in bliss. But the peace couldn't last forever. That night, Captain Wren called Daniel to his quarters. The Maltuvian's face was grim. We received updated orders about our cargo, Wren said, pulling up a document on his screen. The research station sent details about what they planned to do with the stalker. Daniel read the document, and with each line his blood ran colder. Brain dissection, vivisection to study internal organ structures, tests on pain responses and aggression triggers. The stalker wasn't going to a sanctuary or a zoo. It was going to a lab where it would be tortured in the name of science. They're going to kill it, Daniel said, his voice barely above a whisper, slowly, painfully. It's legal, Wren said, but he didn't sound happy about it. The Varkesh stalker species isn't classified as sentient. They're considered dangerous fauna. No protection under interstellar law, but it is sentient. You've seen the recordings. It understands. It communicates. It feels. I know. Wren rubbed his face with two hands while the other two gripped the edge of his desk. But I'm bound by contract, Reed. We deliver the cargo as specified. If we don't, we face penalties that could ruin the ship and everyone on it. Daniel felt something break inside him. He thought about the stalker in its cage, trusting him, waiting for him to come back each day, believing in whatever way it understood that it was safe now. I can't let that happen, Daniel said. Reed, I can't. Captain, I know what this means. I know what I'm asking. But that creature down there trusts me. It trusted me when it had every reason not to. When everyone told it humans were the enemy. And now I'm supposed to deliver it to be torn apart while it's still alive? Wren looked at him for a long moment. What are you proposing? There's a colony world. Haven's Rest. 3 days from here if we adjust course. They have loose regulations. They protect refugees, both sentient and non-sentient. If we could get the stalker there, that's theft of cargo. Breach of contract. Fraud. We'd all lose our licenses. Possibly face prison time. I know. And you're willing to risk that? Your entire career, your future for a creature you've known for 2 weeks? Daniel thought about the stalker's amber eyes. The way it leaned into his touch. The trust it had given him when trust should have been impossible. Yes, he said simply. I am. Captain Wren was quiet for a very long time. Then he did something Daniel didn't expect. He smiled. You know what the problem with long careers is, Reed? You stop remembering why you started, why you went into space in the first place as captain. I became a spacer because I wanted to see wonders, to find things in the universe that would amaze me. Somewhere along the way, I forgot that. I started seeing cargo, not creatures. Contracts, not connections. Wren stood up. Maybe it's time I remembered. What are you saying? I'm saying that tomorrow I'm calling a crew meeting, and I'm going to present your plan, and we're going to vote on it. Wren met Daniel's eyes. I can't promise they'll agree, but I think you might be surprised. The next morning, the entire crew of the Distant Horizon gathered in the common room. Captain Wren explained the situation, the research station's plans, Daniel's proposal, the risks they would all face if they helped. First Officer Hallex was the first to speak. I've been researching the facility where we're supposed to deliver the stalker. They have a reputation, a bad one, multiple complaints filed with ethics committees. Nothing proven, but the pattern is clear. They don't care about the creatures they study. They just care about the data. Engineer Bors spoke next. My people were once considered non-sentient by other species. We were enslaved. Worked to death. It took generations to gain recognition as equals. His rocky face was hard. I won't be part of doing that to another species. Even one that can't speak for itself. The navigator, a quiet woman named Freya, cleared her throat. Haven's Rest is on our route if we go through the Azure Veil Nebula. Sensor interference there would explain any navigation adjustments. We could claim we got turned around, needed to dock for recalibration. One by one, the crew members spoke. Some worried about the consequences. Some questioned if they had the right to make this choice. But in the end, every single person voted the same way. They would save the stalker. Daniel went down to the cargo hold that night and sat beside the cage. The stalker pushed its nose through the bars and Daniel held it gently in his hands. "We're going to get you out of here," he whispered. "I promise. You're going to be free. You're going to have forests and sky, and maybe, if we're lucky, you'll find others like you. A new pack." The stalker made its rumbling purr sound and licked Daniel's hand with a tongue that was surprisingly rough. "I won't be able to stay with you," Daniel continued, feeling his throat tighten. "Once you're free, I have to leave. But you'll be safe. That's what matters. You'll be safe, and you'll be free, and you'll never have to be afraid again." The stalker looked at him with those intelligent amber eyes, and Daniel wondered if it understood, if it knew that everything was about to change. Above them, the distant horizon adjusted its course. The stars shifted in the viewports, and the ship that had been carrying cargo toward a nightmare began carrying hope toward freedom instead. But the hardest part was still ahead. Getting the stalker off the ship, finding it a safe home, and then most difficult of all, saying goodbye to a creature that had become something Daniel never expected. A friend. 3 days in the Azure Veil Nebula felt like 3 years. The blue-purple clouds surrounded the ship, beautiful and dangerous, their charged particles playing havoc with the sensors. It was the perfect cover for what they were doing, but it also made navigation treacherous. Every crew member worked double shifts, checking and rechecking their course. Daniel spent almost every waking moment with the stalker. He was trying to prepare it for what came next, though he had no idea how to explain freedom to a creature that had lived in a cage for months. He just talked, his voice soft and constant, while the stalker listened with that intense focus it always gave him. "There's a place we're taking you," Daniel said, running his hands along the stalker's spine, feeling the way the ridge fur laid flat under his touch. "A planet. Haven's Rest. It's got heavy gravity like your homeworld. Thick forests, open sky. There are people there who help creatures like you. Refugees. Animals that got caught up in bad situations." The stalker made a questioning sound, tilting its head. "I know you don't understand. I wish you could. I wish I could tell you that everything's going to be okay and you'd really know what I mean." Daniel's voice cracked slightly. "I wish I could go with you. But I can't. Once you're free, I have to leave. We all do. The ship needs to keep moving and you need to stay hidden." The stalker pushed its head under Daniel's hand, demanding more scratches. Daniel laughed despite the tears on his face. "You've taught me something," he said, "about trust. About how the scariest things can become the best things if you just give them a chance. I hope wherever you end up, someone else gives you that chance too." On the 3rd day, they emerged from the nebula on the edge of the Haven's Rest system. Captain Wren contacted the colony's spaceport, reporting containment issues and requesting emergency docking. The port administrator, a tired-sounding woman who'd clearly dealt with stranger situations, granted permission without much question. Daniel had already made contact with the sanctuary. The director, a woman named Beth, had agreed to meet them at the docking bay. She'd asked very few questions, which Daniel appreciated. Haven's Rest had a reputation for accepting refugees of all kinds, no questions asked. It was why they'd chosen it. As the distant horizon descended toward the planet's surface, Daniel stood at the viewport in the cargo hold, watching the world grow larger. It was beautiful, green and blue, with massive forests covering most of the continents. White clouds drifted across the sky. It looked alive in a way that space stations and cargo ships never did. The stalker stood beside him, its front paws up on a cargo container to see out the viewport. Its tail wagged slowly and it made soft, excited sounds. Could it smell the forests through the recycled air? Could it sense somehow that this was a place like home? They landed with barely a jolt. Captain Wren's voice came over the intercom. "Reed, we have 20 minutes before port control expects status updates. Make them count." Daniel opened the stalker's cage for the last time. The creature bounded out, full of energy that had been building for days. It circled Daniel, making happy sounds, clearly thinking this was another play session. "Come on," Daniel said, his voice thick. "Let's get you home." He led the stalker down the cargo ramp. The moment they stepped outside, everything changed. The stalker froze, its whole body going rigid. Its nostrils flared wide, taking in air that smelled of trees and earth and growing things. Air that hadn't been recycled through a ship's filters. Real air, from a real world. The creature threw back its head and let out a sound that made Daniel's chest ache. Not a howl, not a roar, but something between them. A cry of recognition, of homecoming. Beth was waiting at the edge of the docking pad with a transport vehicle. She was older than Daniel expected, with gray hair and weathered skin that spoke of years spent outdoors. When she saw the stalker, her eyes widened. "That's a Varkesh stalker," she said. "Yes. They're supposed to be impossible to handle, violent, unmanageable. They're supposed to be a lot of things," Daniel said. The stalker pressed against his leg, watching Beth with cautious amber eyes. "Mostly they're just scared and alone." Beth studied the creature, then nodded slowly. "We have a protected territory. 300 square kilometers of old-growth forest. Heavy gravity, similar to Vrakon 4. There's a river system, plenty of game." She paused. "There are others." Daniel's heart jumped. "Others? Other stalkers?" "A small pack. 4 of them. They were released illegally about 5 years ago by a transport crew that couldn't bring themselves to deliver them to a fight ring. They've been thriving here, wild but healthy. If your friend can integrate with them..." Beth trailed off, letting the possibility hang in the air. A pack. The stalker could have a pack again. The loneliness that had driven it mad in the cage, that had made it lash out at everything, could end. It could be whole again. Daniel knelt beside the stalker, pulling it close. The creature's scales were warm under his hands. Its breath was hot against his face. It licked his cheek with that rough tongue, and Daniel laughed through his tears. "You're going to have a family again," he whispered. "You hear me? A real pack. Not just me, but others like you. You're going to be okay. Better than okay. You're going to be free." The stalker made its rumbling purr sound and leaned into him, nearly knocking him over with its weight. Beth gave them a few minutes, then cleared her throat gently. "We need to move. Port control will be checking in soon." Daniel nodded. He stood, and the stalker stood with him. Together they walked to Beth's transport. The vehicle was open-topped, designed for moving through rough terrain. The stalker jumped in easily, clearly eager to move, to run, to explore this new world. Daniel climbed in beside it. He wanted these last few minutes. Needed them. Beth drove them away from the spaceport into the forest that bordered the landing area. The trees grew thick here, their trunks massive and ancient. The canopy overhead filtered the sunlight into green-gold patterns. The stalker stood up in the transport, its nose working constantly, taking in every scent. After about 10 minutes, Beth stopped at the edge of a clearing. "This is the border of the protected territory," she said. "Beyond this point, no hunting, no development, no interference. It's as wild as we can make it." Daniel stepped out of the transport. The stalker followed, but slowly now. He could sense something was ending. The creature pressed against Daniel's side, looking up at him with those amber eyes full of questions. "This is where you stay," Daniel said, his voice breaking. "This is home now. You're safe here, protected, free to run and hunt and live the way you were meant to." He buried his face in the stalker's ridge fur, breathing in its scent one last time. Dust and metal from the ship, but underneath something wild and animal and alive. "Thank you," he whispered, "for trusting me, for teaching me that fear and violence aren't the same thing, for being proof that connection is possible even when everything says it shouldn't be." The stalker licked his face, then pulled back. It looked at Daniel, then at the forest, then back at Daniel, deciding. And then, from somewhere deep in the trees, came a sound. A pack call. The complex harmonized howl song of Varkesh stalkers. The sound Daniel had played for the creature weeks ago on his datapad. But real now. Alive. The stalker's entire body went rigid. Its ears shot forward. It took a step toward the forest, then looked back at Daniel one more time. "Go," Daniel said, smiling through his tears. "Go find your pack. You don't need me anymore. You never really did. You just needed someone to give you a chance." The stalker touched its nose to Daniel's hand one final time. Then it turned and ran, 6 legs moving with incredible grace and power, scales flashing blue-purple in the dappled sunlight. It crashed through the undergrowth, heading toward the sound of its own kind, toward the family it had lost and was about to find again. Daniel watched until he couldn't see the stalker anymore. Couldn't hear it. Until there was nothing left but the forest and the wind in the trees. Beth touched his shoulder gently. "That was a good thing you did." "It was the only thing I could do," Daniel said. They drove back to the spaceport in silence. The distant horizon was already preparing for departure when Daniel climbed back up the ramp. Captain Wren was waiting for him at the top. "It's done?" the captain asked. "It's done. The stalker is free. There's a pack in the forest. It has a chance now." "A real chance," Wren nodded. "Then let's get out of here before anyone asks too many questions." As the ship lifted off, Daniel stood at the cargo hold viewport, watching Haven's Rest shrink below them. Somewhere down there in a forest that looked like a tiny patch of green from this height, the stalker was running. Free. Wild. Home. He'd never see it again. Never scratch behind its ears or hear that rumbling purr. Never watch those amber eyes close in contentment. But it was worth it. Every risk, every consequence that might still come. It was all worth it to know that one creature who had been bound and broken was now free and whole. The viewport showed only stars now. The distant horizon was back in the void, heading away from Haven's Rest, carrying its crew toward whatever came next. There would be consequences. An investigation into the lost cargo. Questions they would have to answer carefully. But for now, for this moment, Daniel felt at peace. He'd done something that mattered. He'd reached out his hand to something terrifying and found a friend. He'd proven that trust, once given and returned, could change everything. And somewhere below, on a world covered in forests, a stalker ran through the trees, heading toward the sound of pack song, ready to be complete again. 6 months after leaving Haven's Rest, the investigation finally closed. The distant horizon had been fined heavily for losing its cargo, and the crew had taken a hit to their reputation. Daniel's file now carried a mark for negligence in cargo management. Some shipping companies wouldn't hire him anymore. The nice, safe corporate jobs he'd hoped for when he first went to space were permanently out of reach. He didn't regret it for a second. Captain Wren had retired, as planned, though he admitted the incident had influenced his timing. First Officer Hallex had been promoted to captain of the distant horizon. Engineer Bors remained, grumbling about regulations but secretly pleased they'd done the right thing. The crew stayed together, bonded by the secret they shared. Daniel had expected to struggle finding new work, but 3 weeks after the investigation ended, he received a message. An organization called the Frontier Conservation Initiative wanted to interview him. They'd been following his story through spacer networks, where the tale of the human who saved a terror hound had taken on a life of its own. The interview was simple. "We work with difficult species on frontier worlds," the director explained. "Creatures that colonists want removed, but that we believe deserve better. Most of our staff are trained in standard animal management. They do good work, but they lack something. A perspective. A willingness to see beyond threat classifications." "And you think I have that perspective?" Daniel asked. "We think your species has it. Earth's history with domestication is unique in the known galaxy. You don't just conquer or avoid dangerous creatures. You befriend them. That's a valuable skill out here on the edge of civilization." Daniel took the job. His first assignment was on a mining colony where a species of pack predators had been raiding supply depots. The colonists wanted them exterminated. Daniel spent 3 months observing the creatures, learning their patterns. He discovered they weren't raiders. They were desperate. Mining operations had destroyed their primary hunting grounds, forcing them into contact with the colony. Working with both the colonists and the creatures, Daniel helped establish a protected zone where the predators could hunt safely. The raids stopped. The colonists kept their supplies, and a species that would have been wiped out survived. It was good work, important work. But Daniel never forgot the stalker. Late at night, alone in temporary housing on whatever world he was assigned to, he would pull up the holovid he'd kept, those security camera recordings of the stalker in its cage, the first time it had accepted his touch, the way its tail had wagged when it trusted him. He wondered if it was happy, if it had found its pack, if it remembered the human who had sat beside its cage and talked about Earth and dogs and trust. A year after leaving Haven's Rest, Daniel finally got his answer. He'd been assigned to a world near the Haven's Rest system, helping relocate a herd of massive herbivores away from expanding farmland. The work was going well and he had a few days of leave coming. On impulse, he booked passage to Haven's Rest. Beth met him at the spaceport, older by a year, but still sharp-eyed and energetic. "Wondered if you'd ever come back," she said. "I shouldn't," Daniel admitted. "If anyone traces my connection here, it could cause problems for you in the sanctuary." "Let them trace it. We've got lawyers, good ones. And public opinion on our side, she smiled. Besides, I think someone wants to see you. They took the transport into the forest, following the same route Daniel remembered from that last day. The trees were taller now, or maybe he was just seeing them with clearer eyes. The forest smelled alive, rich with growing things and animal musk and earth. Beth drove deeper into the protected territory than before, following trails that were barely visible. We don't come out here often, she explained. The stalkers don't need us. But we monitor them, make sure they're healthy. Your friend integrated with the pack better than we hoped. You've seen it? Occasionally. Usually from a distance. They're wild now. Really wild. That's how it should be. They stopped at a ridge overlooking a river valley. Beth handed Daniel a pair of binoculars. Down there, she said. By the river. Daniel raised the binoculars, adjusting the focus. At first, he saw nothing but trees and water. Then movement caught his eye, stalkers, 5 of them playing in the shallow water. They were hunting, working together to drive fish into the shallows where they could be caught. It was beautiful to watch, the coordination and communication between them. Pack behavior, honed by thousands of generations. One of the stalkers was larger than the others, its scales a distinctive midnight blue with hints of purple. It caught a fish and tossed it onto the bank, then turned to make sure the smaller stalkers were eating. That's it, Beth said quietly. Your stalker. The pack accepted it as a member, and now it's one of the primary hunters. That protective behavior, making sure the others eat first, that's unusual. Most stalkers are more focused on hierarchy, but this one seems to put the pack above itself. Daniel watched through the binoculars, his vision blurring with tears. The stalker looked healthy, strong. Its coat gleamed in the sunlight, the wound on its flank healed to nothing but a small scar. It moved with confidence, secure in its place within the group. It learned that on the ship, Daniel said softly. Learned that sometimes someone takes care of you not because they want something, but because you need it. It's just passing that forward. They watched for nearly an hour as the stalkers hunted and played and rested together. At one point, the blue stalker climbed onto a rock and threw back its head, singing a pack call. The others joined in, their voices harmonizing in that complex, beautiful way that had broken Daniel's heart the first time he heard it. But now it didn't sound lonely. It sounded complete. Should we go down? Daniel asked. Would it remember me? Beth considered this. Maybe, but is that what's best for it? You gave it freedom. Freedom from cages, from fear, from dependence. Even dependence on you. If you go down there, you risk becoming something it watches for. Something it waits for instead of being fully present in its own life. Daniel knew she was right. He'd saved the stalker so it could be wild, not so it could remain tethered to him. The kindest thing he could do now was stay away. Let it live the life it was meant to have without human interference. You're right, he said. We should go. As they turned to leave, the blue stalker suddenly raised its head, nostrils flaring. It was too far away to see Daniel clearly, but it was looking in his direction. For a long moment, it stood perfectly still, as if trying to identify a familiar scent on the wind. Then one of the other stalkers called to it, and it turned away, rejoining its pack. The drive back to the spaceport was quiet. Daniel kept seeing that moment when the stalker had looked up, had almost recognized him. Part of him wished he'd called out, made himself known, but a bigger part was glad he hadn't. The work you're doing with the conservation initiative, Beth said as they neared the port. It's making a difference. We're hearing about it even out here. Colonies that would have exterminated species are finding alternatives. It's slow change, but it's change. One creature at a time, Daniel said. That's how all change starts. One person, one choice, one act of compassion. Then another. Then another. Until suddenly the whole galaxy is looking at dangerous creatures differently. Back on his transport ship, heading to his next assignment, Daniel recorded a log entry. He did this sometimes, keeping a private record of his thoughts. Saw the stalker today, he said to the recorder. It's happy, healthy, part of a pack. Everything I hoped for when we set it free. I don't think I'll go back. It doesn't need me anymore. Maybe it never really did. I was just a bridge between the cage and freedom. That's enough. That's more than enough. He paused, gathering his thoughts. Captain Wren asked me once what humans are. I've been thinking about that question for over a year now. And I think I finally have an answer. We're the species that looks at something terrifying and asks, what if? What if it's not a monster? What if it's just scared? What if we tried to understand instead of destroy? That capacity for what if has gotten us in trouble throughout history, but it's also given us dogs and cats and horses and all the other creatures we've partnered with. It's let us survive on a dangerous world by making alliances instead of enemies. And now out here in space, maybe that's our real gift to the galaxy. Not our technology or our art or our science, but our willingness to reach out our hand to something with teeth and see what happens. He stopped the recording and looked out at the stars. Somewhere behind him, Haven's Rest was already too far away to see, and on that world a stalker that had once been called a terror hound was running through forests with its pack, free and wild and whole. Years later, Daniel would work with dozens of species. Some missions succeeded, some failed. Some creatures adapted to coexistence with colonists, some couldn't and had to be relocated. Each case was different, each requiring patience and understanding and the willingness to look beyond fear. But he never forgot the stalker. That first connection that had shown him what his life's work would be. In every aggressive creature he encountered, he looked for the fear underneath. In every impossible situation, he looked for the bridge between what was and what could be. And sometimes late at night on distant worlds, he would hear howls in the darkness, pack calls from predators marking territory, singing to the stars, and he would smile, remembering amber eyes and ridge fur soft under his fingers and the rumbling purr of a creature that had learned to trust. The galaxy was full of monsters. But Daniel had learned the truth that his species had always known, encoded in thousands of years of partnership with predators. Monsters were just people you hadn't understood yet, and sometimes if you were patient enough, brave enough, human enough, those monsters could become friends. That was the real story. Not about a human who saved a terror hound, but about a terror hound that saved a human. That showed him his purpose. That taught him the value of reaching out your hand, even when you're terrified. Because on the other side of that fear is connection, understanding, trust. The universe was vast and often cold and sometimes cruel, but it was also full of possibility, full of creatures that just needed someone to give them a chance, to see past the teeth and claws to the person underneath. And as long as there were humans willing to scratch behind the ears of something dangerous, there was hope. For the monsters, for the misunderstood, for everyone trying to find their place in a galaxy that didn't always make room for them. Daniel fell asleep that night thinking about the stalker, hoping it was happy, knowing it was free, grateful that their paths had crossed in that cargo hold so long ago. Sometimes the briefest connections changed everything. Sometimes a few weeks of trust and patience and compassion could ripple out in ways you never expected. He'd given the stalker its freedom, but the stalker had given him something too. A purpose, a calling, a reason to wake up every day and try to make the galaxy a little bit kinder. One misunderstood creature at a time. And that, Daniel thought as sleep finally claimed him, was more than enough. It was everything.
Derek Walsh had seen some strange things in his 34 years, but nothing quite prepared him for the sight of a 12-foot-tall insect wearing a safety vest. The creature's multiple eyes blinked at him in what might have been confusion or concern. Hard to tell with bugs. You understand the risks, yes? Churek clicked his mandibles together nervously. This division handles the most dangerous cargo in the galaxy. One mistake, and you become a statistic. Derek nodded, keeping his expression neutral. Back home in Montana, he'd worked with 2,000-pound bulls that could gore a man in seconds. He figured the principle was the same, just with different packaging. I've handled difficult animals before. I'll be careful. The insectoid supervisor made a sound like rattling plates. Probably alien laughter, though Derek couldn't be sure. Animals. Yes, we process animals here, but not like your Earth creatures. Churek tapped a control panel, and a holographic image appeared between them. This is a rift jaw. Derek studied the rotating image. The creature looked like someone had taken a wolf, covered it in armored plates, and replaced its teeth with crystalline daggers. For powerful legs, ended in claws that could probably shred steel. Its eyes glowed with an unsettling intelligence. They come from a planet called Kragmar. Churek continued. Gravity 3 times Earth standard. Atmosphere so toxic it would dissolve your lungs in minutes. These creatures are apex predators in the truest sense. Class 5 extinction threats. What does that mean exactly? It means a single rift jaw, if released on a populated world, could theoretically kill every living thing on that planet within a standard year. Churek's antennae drooped. We have one rule when handling them. Only one rule that matters above all others. Derek leaned forward, paying attention now. Never make eye contact with a rift jaw. Never. Their hunting instinct interprets direct eye contact as a challenge. Once triggered, they enter a killing frenzy. No force in the galaxy has ever stopped one when that happens. The only survivors are those who never looked. What happens to those who do? Churek pulled up another hologram. This one showed a list of names, hundreds of them, maybe thousands. Next to each name was a single word: deceased. This is the complete record of every being who has made eye contact with a rift jaw in the last 3 centuries. As you can see, the survival rate is 0.0%. Derek felt a chill run down his spine, but he kept his voice steady. When am I likely to encounter one? Next week. A transport arrives carrying 6 specimens bound for a military research facility. We are the processing station. You will be part of the handling team. Churek's whole body seemed to shudder. I have overseen 17 rift-jaw transfers in my career. Each time, I'm certain it will be my last. The fear never fades. The rest of the orientation passed in a blur of safety protocols, emergency procedures, and dire warnings. Derek met the other members of his team. There was Hollis, a rock-like being from a high-gravity world who communicated through vibrations in the floor. A pair of energy-based life forms named Left and Right who floated in containment suits and spoke in perfect harmony. And Voss, a mammalian alien covered in purple fur who had worked the dangerous cargo division for 20 years. The bug told you about the rift jaws, yeah? Voss asked during their break. His translator made his voice sound gravelly and tired. He did. Seems serious. Voss barked a laugh that sounded bitter. Serious doesn't cover it. Human. I've seen a lot of scary things pass through this station. Acid spitters from the boiling nebula. Void sharks that can survive in hard vacuum. Once we even processed a juvenile star eater. He leaned in close. None of them scare me like rift jaws. Those things aren't just predators. They're death-shaped into flesh and bone. Derek wanted to ask more questions, but an alarm chimed through the station. Churek's voice crackled over the communication system. All personnel to stations. We have an early arrival. The Riftjaw transport has just entered our sector. They will be docking in 4 hours. Prepare for lockdown protocols. The break room emptied as beings of every shape and size hurried to their posts. Derek followed Voss, trying to memorize the route through the winding corridors of Gamma 7 Station. Through the massive windows, he could see the transport ship approaching. It was heavily armored, covered in warning symbols that didn't need translation. First rule, Voss said as they walked. When they arrive, you do exactly what I say when I say it. Second rule, you wear your reflective visor at all times in the processing area. Third rule, if something goes wrong, you run. You don't try to be a hero. You don't think you can help. You just run and seal the bulkhead behind you. And the fourth rule, Voss stopped and turned to face him. There is no fourth rule. Just don't look them in the eyes. Everything else is negotiable. That one isn't. Derek nodded slowly. Back on his family's ranch, his father had taught him to read animals, to understand their body language, their moods, their intentions. A scared horse was different from an angry bull. A protective mother cow required different handling than a territorial stallion. Every creature communicated, even if they couldn't speak. But his father had also taught him one other thing. When everyone tells you an animal is dangerous, you listen. Pride got more ranchers killed than any wild beast ever did. 4 hours later, Derek stood in the processing bay, wearing his reflective visor and trying to control his breathing. The transport ship had docked. Through the reinforced glass, he could see the containment units being moved into position. Each one was the size of a small room, covered in energy fields and warning lights. And inside each one, a rift jaw waited. Even through the multiple layers of protection, Derek could feel something primal stirring in his gut. An instinct older than civilization, the prey animal's recognition of a predator. The galaxy's deadliest four-legged beasts had arrived, and Derek Walsh was about to meet them face to face, just not eye to eye. Never eye to eye. The processing bay had gone silent, except for the hum of containment fields and the nervous breathing of the handling team. Derek watched as the first massive unit rolled off the transport ship, guided by automated systems that kept any living being at a safe distance. Through the reinforced walls of the container, he caught his first real glimpse of a riftjaw. The creature paced inside its prison, each movement precise and controlled. Its armored hide seemed to absorb light, making it look like a shadow given solid form. Those crystalline fangs caught the overhead lights and scattered them into rainbow fragments. "Beautiful, isn't it?" Voss whispered beside him, like watching a natural disaster in slow motion. You can't look away even though you know it could kill you. Churik scuttled between the team members, checking equipment and reciting protocols in a rapid-fire stream of clicks and words. Visors sealed. Check. Emergency barriers armed. Check. Evacuation routes confirmed. Check. His antennae quivered with each item on his list. The second containment unit arrived, then the third. Each held another rift jaw, each one slightly different. One had scars across its armor plating. Another was larger than the rest, its muscles coiled with obvious power. A third had distinctive markings along its spine that glowed faintly in the dim light. That'd be why the time all 6 units were in position, Derek's hands had started to sweat inside his work gloves. He'd been around dangerous animals his whole life, but never 6 of the most lethal predators in the galaxy all in one place. The statistical improbability of survival, if anything went wrong, was almost funny. Almost. Transfer sequence beginning, announced the station's computer in a calm, measured voice that seemed inappropriate for the situation. All non-essential personnel evacuate to safe zones. Essential personnel maintain minimum safe distance of 50 meters. Around them, the station emptied. Derek watched through the windows as hundreds of beings fled to the reinforced shelters deep in Gamma 7's core. Whole sections sealed themselves behind blast doors. In minutes, the processing level was nearly deserted. "We're the expendables," Hollis rumbled. His words fell through the floor rather than heard. "If this goes wrong, better to lose 5 than 500. Cheerful thought, muttered left and right in harmony, their energy forms flickering anxiously inside their containment suits. Voss checked his equipment one more time. "All right, rookies and veterans alike, listen up. We're going to run a standard security scan on each unit. Check the containment fields, verify the transport restraints, confirm the specimen's health status. We do this by the book, we do this slow, and we all go home tonight." Derek took his position as assigned, monitoring readouts from a safe console while the more experienced handlers worked closer to the units. His job was simple. Watch the numbers, call out any anomalies, and don't do anything stupid. The first 3 scans went smoothly. Each rift jaw remained calm, though Derek noticed they all tracked movement outside their containers with those glowing eyes. Intelligent eyes, not the blank stare of a mindless predator, but something aware and calculating. During the 4th scan, things changed. Voss was running his scanner along the containment field when warning lights began flashing. "We've got a power fluctuation in Unit 4. The field is holding, but it's cycling unstable." Churik rushed to the control panel, his multiple limbs flying across the interface. "Rerouting backup power. Compensating for the drain. It should stabilize in 30 seconds. Those 30 seconds stretched like hours. The riftjaw inside Unit 4 had stopped pacing. It stood perfectly still, head tilted slightly, as if listening to something only it could hear. Derek found himself watching it, fascinated despite the danger point 20 seconds. The creature's breathing changed, faster now. Was it sensing the weakness in its cage? 10 seconds. One of the crystalline fangs began to vibrate, producing a sound just at the edge of Derek's hearing. High-pitched, an unsettling 0.5 seconds. The rift jaw tensed, muscles coiling. Then the power stabilized and the field returned to full strength. But the creature didn't relax. It had felt that moment of vulnerability, and now it knew. These prisons weren't perfect. They could fail. "We need to expedite this transfer," Churik said, his voice tight with stress. "Get them to the secure holding area and into the permanent containment system. We're not equipped for a long-term stay." They moved faster after that, running the remaining scans with quick efficiency. Derek noticed that all 6 rift jaws had become more alert, more focused. Whatever Unit 4 had sensed, the others had noticed its reaction. They were communicating somehow, sharing information without sound or gesture that he could detect. The transfer to the holding bay required moving each massive unit through a series of corridors and lifts. Derek helped guide them remotely, making sure the automated systems didn't catch on any obstacles. Through the monitors, he watched each rift jaw react to the movement. None of them seemed distressed. If anything, they appeared curious, studying their surroundings through the transparent sections of their containers. When the last unit was locked into place in the holding bay, Voss let out a breath that sounded like he'd been holding it for hours. 1 down, 6 days to go. The military transport arrives next week to take them to the research facility. Until then, we keep them fed, monitored, and very, very contained. Derek removed his reflective visor now that they were behind the safety of the control room. The holding bay was visible through multiple screens, each unit positioned in its own reinforced section. The whole area could be vented into space in case of emergency, though Churik assured them that had never been necessary. Never been necessary yet, Voss corrected. There's always a first time with rift jaws. As the team filed out for their shift break, Derek lingered at the monitors. He studied each creature, noting their different behaviors. The scarred one lay down almost immediately, conserving energy. The largest one continued to pace, examining every inch of its prison. The one with the glowing markings, Unit 7 according to the label, sat on its haunches and stared directly at the nearest camera. Derek found himself staring back at the screen, at those intelligent eyes watching through the lens. It felt less like observing a dangerous animal and more like being observed by something that understood far more than it should. Don't anthropomorphize them, Voss said, appearing at Derek's shoulder. That's how people make mistakes. These aren't misunderstood pets or noble beasts. They're engineered by evolution to be perfect killers. Nothing more, nothing less. I wasn't, Derek replied, though he wasn't entirely sure that was true. Just trying to understand them. There's nothing to understand. They kill. That's what they do. That's all they do. Voss headed toward the door, then paused. You did good work today, human. Keep it up, and maybe you'll actually survive this job. After Voss left, Derek looked back at the screens one more time. Unit 7 was still watching the camera, still and patient, waiting for something. Derek had a strange feeling that it was waiting for him, but he shook off the thought and left the control room, tried to ignore the weight of those alien eyes following him all the way to the door. 3 days into the transfer period, Derek had settled into a routine. Morning shift meant checking containment integrity, monitoring vital signs, and ensuring the rift jaws received their carefully calculated meals. The creatures ate something that looked like compressed protein blocks, which they could shatter with those crystalline fangs before consuming. Each feeding was done remotely, with automated systems that kept handlers far from anything resembling danger. He'd learned their patterns by now. The scarred one, which the team had started calling patient, always ate first and quickly. The largest, Titan, would inspect its food thoroughly before consuming it, as if checking for poison. Unit 7, the one with the glowing markings that watched everything with those unsettling eyes, often waited the longest to eat. Derek had started thinking of it as observer, though he kept that name to himself. You're getting too comfortable, Voss warned him during their shift overlap. That's when mistakes happen, when you start to think you understand them. Derek wanted to argue, to explain that understanding wasn't the same as being careless, but he recognized the wisdom in Voss's concern. Comfort bred complacency, and complacency got people killed. The accident happened on the 4th day, during what should have been a routine maintenance check. Derek was monitoring from the control room, while Churik performed a remote diagnostic on Unit 7's containment field. The systems had been running perfectly all week, but protocols demanded regular verification. Everything was going smoothly until the sensor array in Observer's unit began throwing error codes. I'm getting false readings, Churik announced, his antennae twitching with confusion. The field strength shows stable, but the monitoring system claims there's a fluctuation. I need to reset the diagnostic array. Can you do it remotely? Derek asked, watching the numbers scroll across his screen. Yes, but I need to disable the secondary sensors for approximately 4 seconds. The primary systems will maintain containment. It should have been safe. The primary containment field had triple redundancy. For seconds was nothing. Derek watched as Churik initiated the reset sequence point 3 seconds in. The primary field flickered. Not failed. Not collapsed. Just flickered like a light on a dimmer switch that someone had bumped. Maybe a quarter second of reduced power, if that. But it was enough. Observer moved faster than Derek's eyes could track. One moment the rift jaw was sitting calmly in the center of its unit. The next, it had crossed the entire space and struck the containment barrier with one massive paw. The impact sent a shudder through the whole holding bay. Alarms screamed throughout the station. Red emergency lights bathed everything in crimson. Automated defenses activated, additional barriers slamming into place around Unit 7. Evacuate. Churik's voice was high-pitched with panic. Abandon the holding bay. Seal the section. Hollis and the energy twins were already running. Their footsteps and flickering lights disappeared down the corridor as blast doors began to close. Voss grabbed Derek's arm, trying to pull him away from the control console. Move, human. Now. But Derek couldn't move. He stared at the monitor showing Unit 7, watching observers' reaction. The rift jaw had backed away from the barrier after that single strike. It wasn't throwing itself against the containment in a frenzy. It wasn't trying to escape. It had tested the weakness, and now it was watching, waiting to see what would happen next. It's not attacking, Derek said. What? Voss yanked harder on his arm. Look at it. The field is stable now. It had a moment of opportunity, and it's not taking it. It's just standing there. On the screen, Observer sat back on its haunches in the exact center of the unit. Its head turned slowly until it was facing the camera again, facing Derek through the digital eye that connected them. And Derek, without thinking, without considering the consequences or the rules or the thousands of names on that list of the deceased, looked directly into the Riftjaw's eyes on the monitor. Don't, Voss shouted, but it was too late. The connection was instant and electric. Derek felt like he'd touched a live wire, every nerve ending suddenly aware and alive. Those glowing eyes on the screen held an intelligence that was staggering in its depth. This wasn't an animal. This was a person, a being that thought and felt and understood. Observer tilted its head slowly to the left, studying Derek through the camera lens. Its crystalline fangs were visible but not bared in threat. Its posture was relaxed but alert. Every line of its body language spoke of curiosity, not aggression. Derek knew that language. He'd seen it 1,000 times in horses meeting a new handler, in bulls sizing up whether someone was a threat or just another part of the landscape. This was assessment, not challenge. Easy, Derek whispered to the screen, his voice soft and steady. Nobody's trying to hurt you. You're okay. The Riftjaw's ears, small and barely visible among its armor plating, twitched forward. Could it hear him through the audio system? Did it understand tone, if not words? Derek, you need to look away, Voss said, his voice careful now. Very slowly, very carefully break eye contact and step back from the screen. It's not going to attack. You don't know that. Nobody knows that. Everyone who's ever made that assumption is dead. Look at it, Voss. Really look. Does that look like a creature in a killing frenzy? On the monitor, Observer remained perfectly still except for its eyes, which tracked Derek's face through the camera with intense focus. Its breathing was slow and controlled. Its muscles were loose, not coiled for a strike. The seconds stretched into a minute. Derek maintained the eye contact, reading every subtle shift in the Riftjaw's posture the way his father had taught him to read livestock. The creature was tense, but not aggressive. Curious, but not threatening. It was doing exactly what Derek was doing, trying to understand what it was facing. After what felt like an hour, but was probably less than 3 minutes, Derek slowly lowered his gaze to the console in front of him. He'd broken eye contact. He was still alive. The Riftjaw hadn't even moved. The holding bay alarms were still blaring, but Churik's voice cut through them from somewhere down the corridor. Derek? Are you alive? Please respond if you're alive. I'm fine, Derek called back. Everything's fine. The containment is stable. Voss stared at him like he'd grown a second head. You broke the rule. You made direct eye contact with a rift jaw, and you're not dead. Yeah. Derek's hands were shaking now that the adrenaline was catching up with what he'd done. I noticed that. This is impossible. This doesn't happen. This has never happened. Derek looked back at the monitor. Observer was still watching the camera, but something had changed in its posture. The rift jaw looked almost relaxed now, like a question had been answered. Maybe, Derek said slowly, the rule isn't as absolute as everyone thinks. Or maybe, Voss countered, you're the luckiest human being who ever lived and you just used up all your luck in one go. They were both right, in a way. But as Derek watched Observer settle down in its containment unit, calm and at ease for the first time since arriving at the station, he knew something fundamental had changed. He'd looked death in the eyes, and death had looked back with curiosity instead of hunger. The galaxy's deadliest four-legged beast had just decided Derek Walsh was interesting, and neither of them knew yet what that would mean. News of Derek's survival spread through Gamma, 7 station faster than a hull breach alarm. Within hours, every being on board knew that a human cargo handler had broken the unbreakable rule and lived to tell about it. By the next morning, the story had jumped to other stations via the communications network. By evening, 3 different xenobiology research teams had requested permission to come study what they were calling the impossible event. Derek found himself in Churik's office, facing not just his supervisor, but also the station commander, a towering being named Grath, who looked like someone had carved a person out of frozen methane and given it a bad attitude. Explain, Grath demanded, his voice like grinding glaciers. In detail, everything that happened. Derek recounted the incident as accurately as he could, from the sensor malfunction to the moment he'd locked eyes with Observer through the camera. He didn't leave anything out, including his assessment of the Riftjaw's body language and behavior. Grath listened without interruption, his crystalline eyes unreadable. When Derek finished, the commander turned to Churik. Your analysis? Statistically impossible, Churik clicked. 300 years of documented encounters. 0 survivors who made eye contact. Yet here stands Derek Walsh, alive and unharmed. His antennae drooped. I cannot explain it with current xenobiological models. The human claims the creature was not aggressive. Do you believe this assessment? Churik hesitated, his mandibles working silently for a moment. The containment sensors recorded no elevated stress markers in the specimen during the encounter. Its heart rate remained stable. Body temperature normal. By every measurable standard, the rift jaw was calm. He looked at Derek with something that might have been respect. I believe his assessment is accurate, though I cannot explain why the creature behaved this way. Grath turned his attention back to Derek. You have expertise with animals, yes? From your home world, I grew up on a cattle ranch. Worked with horses, bulls, some wild animals that would wander onto our property. But nothing like a rift jaw. Yet you claim to have read its intentions through observation alone. Body language is pretty universal, Derek said. Predators across different worlds might look different, but fear looks the same. Aggression looks the same. Curiosity looks the same. The rift jaw was curious, not hostile. Grath made a sound like ice cracking. The research teams want access to you and the specimen. They wish to study this interaction, attempt to replicate it under controlled conditions. I am inclined to grant their request. Derek felt a knot form in his stomach. You want me to make eye contact with Observer again? On purpose. The specimen you call Observer? Yes. Also potentially the others. If this is a reproducible phenomenon rather than a statistical anomaly, it could revolutionize our understanding of rift jaw behavior in psychology. And if it's not reproducible, if it was just luck, then you will die, and we will return to our previous protocols with better data on the limits of rift jaw tolerance. Grath said it matter-of-factly, like discussing the weather. Do you consent to participate in this research? Derek thought about the list of names. All those beings who'd looked into a Riftjaw's eyes and never looked away. He thought about Observer's calm assessment, the intelligence in those alien eyes. He thought about his father's voice. When everyone tells you an animal is dangerous, you listen. But his father had also taught him something else. Animals weren't machines. They were individuals, each one different, each one capable of choice and change. Maybe the problem wasn't the rift jaws. Maybe it was that everyone approached them with fear and aggression, and the creatures simply responded in kind. "I'll do it," Derek said, "but I have conditions." Grath's expression didn't change, but Derek sensed interest. "State them." "First, we do this slowly. No rushing, no pressure. If Observer shows any signs of actual aggression, we stop immediately. Second, I want access to all historical data on Riftjaw encounters. Every report, every incident. Third, I want to work directly with the research teams, not just be a test subject." "Acceptable. The first research team arrives tomorrow. You will begin preparations immediately." Grath stood, signaling the meeting was over. "Do not make me regret this decision, human." After the commander left, Churuk turned to Derek with all his eyes focused in a way that seemed significant. "You understand the risk you are taking? Eat dough." "Then why?" "You could refuse. Find another job. Leave this station and never see a Riftjaw again." Derek considered the question. Why was he doing this? Pride? Curiosity? Some misguided sense that he could succeed where thousands had failed? No, it was simpler than that. "Because Observer didn't attack me," Derek said. "When it had a moment of weakness in the containment field, when it could have tried to break free and kill everything in its path, it didn't. It tested the barrier once and then waited to see what would happen. That's not a mindless killing machine. That's someone making choices." Churuk was quiet for a long moment. "In my culture, there is a saying, the sky does not fall simply because you have not seen it happen, meaning that impossibilities exist whether we acknowledge them or not." His antennae rose slightly. "Perhaps you have shown us an impossibility, Derek Walsh. Or perhaps you have simply revealed our own ignorance." That night, Derek couldn't sleep. He spent hours in the station's data archives, reading every report he could find about Riftjaw encounters. The pattern was clear. Approach with fear and weapons, get killed. Every single incident involved handlers who were terrified, security teams ready to shoot, containment failures that led to panic. Not once did he find a report of someone approaching a Riftjaw calmly, treating it like a living being instead of a monster. Near dawn, Derek made his way to the observation room overlooking the holding bay. Through the reinforced glass, he could see all 6 containment units. Most of the Riftjaws were asleep or resting. But Observer was awake, sitting in the same position as before, watching the cameras. Derek activated the communication system, letting his voice carry into the holding bay through speakers. "I don't know if you can understand me," he said quietly, "but tomorrow we're going to try something that might get me killed. I'm going to trust that you're more than what everyone says you are. I'm going to trust that you can choose not to kill me." Observer's ears twitched at the sound of his voice. The creature stood and walked to the front of its containment unit, as close to the camera as the field would allow. It sat again, perfectly still, and waited. "I've worked with a lot of dangerous animals," Derek continued, talking more to organize his own thoughts than because he expected understanding. "The ones that hurt people usually do it because they're scared or defensive or protecting something, not because they're evil or mindless. I'm betting you the same. I'm betting that if I treat you with respect, if I don't come at you with fear or aggression, you'll respond in kind." The Riftjaw tilted its head, a gesture that looked eerily thoughtful. "So here's the deal," Derek said. "Tomorrow, I'm going to look you in the eyes again. For real this time, not through a camera. And you're going to have a choice. You can kill me and prove everyone right. Or you can show them that they've been wrong about you for 300 years. Observer's crystalline fangs caught the light as it opened its mouth slightly. Not a threat display, almost like a yawn, or maybe the alien equivalent of a smile. Then it settled down onto the floor of its unit, resting its massive head on its front paws, still watching the camera with those intelligent, glowing eyes. Derek took that as a good sign. At least, he hoped it was tomorrow would tell. The research team arrived exactly on schedule, led by a being that introduced herself as Dr. Renna. She was tall and thin, with blue skin that seemed to shimmer in the light and 4 arms that moved independently as she gestured while talking. Behind her came a small army of assistants, all carrying equipment and displaying the nervous energy of scientists facing something unprecedented. "The human who survived," Renna said, looking Derek up and down with eyes that had too many pupils. "You don't look special." "I'm not," Derek replied. "Just stubborn." Stubbornness is not typically considered a survival trait when facing apex predators. She moved past him toward the observation window, studying the rift jaws with obvious fascination. "Yet here you stand. Which specimen made eye contact with you?" Derek pointed to Unit 7. "That one. I've been calling it Observer." "Interesting designation." "Why Observer?" "Because it watches everything. Pay attention." Seems more interested in understanding its environment than the others. Renna made a note on a holographic display that floated near her shoulder. "We will begin with non-invasive testing. Behavioral observation, stress response analysis, communication pattern studies. Only after we have comprehensive baseline data will we attempt direct visual contact again." She turned to Derek. "You will not approach the specimen until I authorize it." "Clear." Derek bristled at the authoritative tone, but nodded. He understood the need for caution, even if part of him wanted to argue that he'd already proven the interaction was possible. The first 2 days of testing were tedious. The research team monitored every aspect of Observer's behavior, comparing it to historical data on rift jaws. They measured its reactions to various stimuli, tested its problem-solving abilities with puzzle feeders, even analyzed the sound frequencies it produced during rest periods. What they found surprised everyone except Derek. The specimen demonstrates cognitive abilities far exceeding our previous estimations, Renna announced during a briefing on the 3rd day. It solved spatial reasoning puzzles designed for beings with advanced intelligence. It recognized patterns and sequences that should be beyond animal comprehension. And most significantly, it appears to modulate its behavior based on who is observing it. "What do you mean?" Churik asked. "Watch." Renna pulled up video footage showing Observer's containment unit. On screen, Voss approached to perform a routine check. The rift jaw immediately stood, moved to the back of its unit, and adopted what Derek recognized as a defensive posture. Not aggressive, but wary and ready. Then the video switched to footage of Derek performing the same check. Observer barely moved, remaining relaxed and attentive, but showing no defensive behavior at all. "It can differentiate between individuals," Renna continued. "It remembers who has shown it respect and who has shown fear. This suggests a level of social cognition we never suspected rift jaws possessed. Or maybe," Derek offered, "we never gave him a chance to show it before. Hard to demonstrate intelligence when everyone who looks at you dies in a panic." Renna's multiple pupils focused on him sharply. "An astute observation. Which brings us to the primary experiment. Tomorrow, we will place you in a controlled environment with the specimen. You will make direct eye contact under monitored conditions. We have prepared every safety measure possible, but I will not mislead you about the risk." "I understand. Do you?" She moved closer, her expression serious. "If our hypothesis is wrong, if your first encounter was merely a statistical anomaly, you will die. The rift jaw will enter its killing frenzy, and nothing we have can stop it before it reaches you. Emergency barriers will seal you in with the creature. You will not have time to regret your choice." Derek felt his mouth go dry, but kept his voice steady. "I know. I'm still willing." The next morning arrived too quickly. Derek stood in a specialized testing chamber that had been constructed overnight, a space large enough to hold both him and Observer with room to move, but small enough that the emergency barriers could seal instantly if needed. The walls were reinforced transparent alloy, allowing the research team to observe from safety while multiple cameras recorded every angle. Observer was brought in through a secured corridor, its containment field guiding it into the chamber before shutting off. The rift jaw stood perfectly still for a moment, taking in its new surroundings. Before its eyes found Derek across the room, they'd removed Derek's reflective visor. Nothing stood between him and those alien eyes now, except 15 meters of open space and his own faith that he'd read the situation correctly. "Beginning test." Renna's voice came through speakers overhead. "Derek, you may proceed at your own pace. If the specimen shows any aggression, the emergency barriers will activate. They should engage in 0.3 seconds. Should, Derek noticed. Not would. Even Rena wasn't certain they'd be fast enough. He took a slow breath and started walking toward Observer. Each step felt like moving through water, his body fighting against instincts that screamed at him to run. But he kept his movements calm and deliberate, approaching the rift jaw the same way he'd approach a nervous horse in an unfamiliar corral. Observer watched him come, its head lowering slightly in what Derek hoped was a non-threatening posture. When Derek was 5 meters away, the rift jaw sat down, folding its powerful legs beneath it in a clear signal. "I'm not hunting you." Derek stopped and sat down as well, crossing his legs and resting his hands on his knees, matching the creature's posture, showing he wasn't a threat either. Then he looked up, meeting Observer's eyes directly for the second time. The connection was still electric, still intense, but different now without the distance of camera between them. Derek could see every detail of those eyes, the way they seemed to hold light and shadow simultaneously. He could see intelligence there, and curiosity, and something else. Loneliness, maybe. The isolation of being seen as a monster by every living thing you encountered. "Hey," Derek said softly. "Remember me?" Observer's ears twitched forward. Its breathing remained steady, controlled. No signs of the legendary killing frenzy. No murderer's. Just one being looking at another, trying to understand. Minutes passed in silence. Derek didn't break eye contact, didn't move except to breathe. He let the rift jaw study him, the same way he was studying it. Trust had to be built, not demanded. Finally, Observer made a sound. Low and rumbling, it came from deep in its chest. Not a growl. Something else. Derek had heard similar sounds from large animals before, usually when they were content or relaxed. A purr, maybe, or the rift jaw equivalent. "Yeah," Derek said, smiling slightly. "We're okay, aren't we? You and me." The rift jaw stood slowly, and Derek heard the research team gasp over the speakers. But Observer wasn't attacking. It was walking toward him, each massive paw placed carefully and deliberately. When it was close enough, it lowered its head and pressed its snout gently against Derek's extended hand. The crystalline fangs were centimeters from his fingers. One bite could sever his arm. One shake of that powerful head could snap his neck. But Derek felt no fear, only wonder. The creature's hide was warmer than he'd expected, and harder, like touching stone that breathed. "Good," Derek whispered. "That's good." Observer made that rumbling sound again, louder now, and Derek felt it vibrate through his bones. The rift jaw's eyes remained locked on his, but there was no challenge there. Only acceptance, recognition, a bridge built between species that everyone had insisted was impossible in the observation room. Rena stood frozen, watching something that shouldn't exist. A human and a rift jaw, together in peace. The galaxy's deadliest four-legged beast had just proven it could choose friendship over fury. And Derek Walsh had proven that sometimes the most dangerous thing wasn't the predator, it was the assumption that predators couldn't be anything else. The footage of Derek's interaction with Observer spread across the galactic network like wildfire. Within days, every major news outlet was running stories about the human who had befriended the unfriendable. Scientific journals demanded data. Military organizations wanted explanations. And 300 years of accepted wisdom about rift jaws began to crumble under the weight of undeniable evidence. Derek spent the following week working with the research team and all 6 rift jaws. What they discovered revolutionized xenobiology. The creatures weren't mindless predators. They were highly social, capable of complex communication through body language and subsonic vocalizations that most species couldn't detect. The killing frenzy everyone feared wasn't inevitable. It was a stress response triggered by the fear and aggression they'd always been met with. Titan, the largest rift jaw, took 3 days to trust Derek enough for eye contact. Patient, the scarred one, needed only hours. Each had its own personality, its own preferences, its own way of interacting with the world. They were individuals, not interchangeable monsters. Everything changed on the 7th day when pirates attacked the station. The assault came without warning. Gamma 7 sensors detected the ships only seconds before they opened fire, their weapons designed to disable rather than destroy. They wanted the station intact and its valuable cargo intact too, including 6 extremely rare and valuable rift jaws. Derek was in the holding bay with Observer when the alarm started screaming. Through the windows, he could see small attack craft swarming around the station's exterior, cutting through defensive positions with practiced efficiency. All personnel to emergency shelters. Grath's voice boomed over the communication system. We are under attack. Security teams engage at will. Civilians evacuate immediately. Derek started toward the exit, but Observer made a sharp, urgent sound that stopped him. The rift jaw was pacing now, agitated in a way Derek had never seen. All 6 creatures were reacting to something, their heads turning in unison toward the same section of wall. They're coming through there, Derek realized, understanding the Riftjaw's superior senses had detected the pirates' approach before the station's sensors could. They're cutting through the hull to get to you. Observer looked at Derek and made a series of quick vocalizations that he was starting to recognize as communication. The meaning was clear even without words. Danger coming. Need to act. I can't let you out, Derek said, his mind racing. If you're loose in the station, people will panic. They'll try to kill you. The Riftjaw moved to its containment field and pressed one paw against it. Not attacking, not testing. Asking, trusting Derek to make the right choice. An explosion rocked the holding bay as the pirates breached the outer hull. Derek saw them pouring through the gap, dozens of armored figures carrying weapons designed to tranquilize large specimens. They'd done their research. They knew what they were after. Derek made a decision that would probably get him court-martialed if he survived. He ran to the control panel and entered the emergency override code Shurik had shown him during training. 6 containment fields dropped simultaneously. 6 rift jaws stood free for the first time since arriving at the station. The pirates saw them and started firing tranquilizer rounds. But rift jaws from a high-gravity death world moved faster than projectiles designed for normal creatures. They scattered, using the holding bay's equipment as cover. Their movements coordinated like a pack that had hunted together for years. With me, Derek shouted, not sure if they'd understand or care. Protect the station. Observer was at his side instantly, followed by the others. They moved as a unit through the corridor, Derek leading them toward the main breach point where station security was fighting a losing battle against superior numbers. The first pirate who saw them screamed and opened fire with live rounds, forgetting his tranquilizer in sheer terror. The shots bounced off Titan's armored hide as the massive Riftjaw charged forward and struck the pirate with one paw, sending him flying into a bulkhead hard enough to dent the metal. But the Riftjaw didn't kill him, didn't even seriously injure him, just neutralized the threat and moved on. More pirates appeared, and more screaming followed. Some ran, some tried to fight. None of them expected the Riftjaws to be working with a human, protecting him while he directed them to defend strategic positions throughout the station. Patient used its agility to leap between walls, herding pirates away from civilian shelters. The 2 smaller Riftjaws worked together to cut off escape routes, driving the attackers toward security teams who could capture them. An observer stayed with Derek, reading his intentions and translating them into actions the other Riftjaws could follow. The battle lasted 18 minutes. When it was over, every pirate was either unconscious, captured, or had fled back to their ships. Not one had been killed, though many would need extensive medical treatment. The Riftjaws had been terrifyingly effective while showing remarkable restraint. Derek stood in the main corridor, breathing hard, with Observer sitting calmly beside him and the other 5 Riftjaws arrayed around them like bodyguards. Station security approached cautiously, weapons lowered but ready, not sure what to make of the scene. Grath arrived minutes later, his crystalline features somehow managing to convey shock. Report, he demanded. The pirates breached the holding bay, Derek explained. I released the Riftjaws. They helped defend the station. You released them. You freed the galaxy's most dangerous predators during a crisis situation. Yes, sir. And they saved lives. Probably dozens of them. Grath looked at the 6 creatures, then at the captured pirates being led away by security, then back at Derek. This will require extensive documentation and review. But you are not immediately arrested, which I suppose indicates my preliminary assessment of your actions. Over the following days, as investigators reviewed the security footage and interviewed witnesses, the truth became undeniable. The Rift Jaws had fought to protect the station and its inhabitants. They'd shown judgment, restraint, and loyalty to a being who had shown them respect. Dr. Renna's final report recommended a complete overhaul of protocols regarding Rift Jaws and other so-called Class 5 extinction threats. The military research facility that was supposed to receive the specimens withdrew their request. Instead, a new facility was proposed, one focused on communication and cooperation rather than containment and study. Derek was offered the position of lead behavioral specialist. He accepted on one condition. The Riftjaws would be treated as intelligent beings deserving of dignity, not as specimens or weapons. 3 months later, Derek stood in the observation room of the new facility, watching Observer and the others interact in a habitat designed for their comfort rather than maximum security. Visitors from across the galaxy came to see the impossible sight. Humans and Riftjaws working together, learning from each other, building something that looked remarkably like friendship. Chirk approached, his antennae rising in what Derek had learned was the insectoid equivalent of a smile. "You have caused quite the disruption in galactic xenobiology, Derek Walsh. 3 centuries of established fact overturned by one stubborn human." "Not that stubborn," Derek replied. "Just willing to look past the fear and see what was really there." "And what was really there?" Derek watched Observer teaching 2 newly arrived Riftjaws how to interact safely with human handlers. The big creature was patient and gentle, demonstrating through example rather than force. A natural teacher, given the chance to be one. "People," Derek said simply. "Different from us, dangerous if threatened, but people nonetheless. Capable of choice, friendship, trust. All they needed was someone willing to extend those things first." Voss appeared behind them, his purple fur looking slightly less unkempt than usual. He'd been one of the first to volunteer for training in the new interaction protocols, overcoming decades of fear through watching Derek's example. "The new arrivals are asking for you," Voss said. "They won't settle down until they meet the human who broke the rule." Derek smiled. "It wasn't really a rule, was it? Just a misunderstanding that became dogma." "Perhaps," Chirk mused. "Or perhaps rules exist until someone is brave enough to prove they don't." As Derek headed down to the habitat, Observer saw him through the transparent wall and made that rumbling sound of greeting that still sent shivers down his spine. Not fear anymore. Something closer to pride. The deadliest 4-legged beast in the galaxy was happy to see him, and Derek was happy to see it back. He'd ignored the rule everyone said would get him killed. In doing so, he discovered something far more important. That empathy and understanding could bridge gaps that weapons and walls never could. That deadly didn't mean mindless. That predators could choose peace when peace was offered. The universe had told him Riftjaws were unstoppable killers. Derek Walsh had casually proven the universe wrong. And in the process, he'd shown the galaxy that sometimes the most dangerous assumptions were the ones everyone accepted without question.